On Christmas Eve, a millionaire decides to surprise his daughters by disguising himself as a blue Santa Claus, but upon arriving, he finds the two girls huddled and crying in the corner. What he discovers about his ex-wife is devastating. The sky was tinged with red as Richard Miller looked upon the mansion he had once called home. Standing before the imposing iron gates, he adjusted the blue Santa Claus suit he was wearing, feeling the weight of the fake beard glued to his face. 6 years. 6 long years since he had last set foot in this place. The fortune he had amassed in the international financial market had demanded increasingly prolonged absences, until home had become just an empty word. Richard took a deep breath. The plan was simple: surprise his twin daughters on Christmas Eve and make up for lost time. Clara and Olivia, his little ones, were already 7 years old. Girls he barely knew, except through sporadic video calls and photos sent by his wife, Helena. The security guard didn't recognize him immediately under the disguise. When he finally opened the gate, his eyes betrayed his surprise. "Mr. Miller? We weren't expecting you, sir." "That was the intention, Peter," Richard replied, observing the long-time employee who remained loyal to the house. "Are the girls here?" "Yes, sir. Mrs. Helena is with them in the master bedroom." Richard walked across the stone path of the garden, feeling his heart race. He had planned this moment for months. When he had decided to sell part of his companies and return permanently to the United States, the idea of the disguise had emerged as a way to break the ice. He knew it wouldn't be easy to win back his daughter's trust. The mansion was elegantly decorated. The Christmas tree glistened in the center of the living room, surrounded by carefully wrapped presents. Everything seemed too perfect. Richard went up the stairs silently, wanting to catch the look of surprise on the girls' faces. The master bedroom door was ajar. He prepared to make his triumphant entrance, but something stopped him. Voices. Helena's sounded different. Cold, sharp. "You will stay here until you learn." No dinner, no television, nothing. Richard froze. Through the crack in the door, he saw Helena from behind. Before her, the two girls were huddled against the wall. One of them, could it be Clara, had a face wet with silent tears. The other, Olivia, kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her small fingers clutching a teddy bear with unnecessary force. "Mommy, please," one of them whispered. "It was just a glass of juice." "I don't want to hear it," Helena cut in. "You know how this works. Every mistake has a price." Richard felt his blood run cold. This was not the Helena he knew, the elegant and sociable woman who had won his heart years ago. There was something methodical, calculated in that coldness that frightened him more than any outburst of anger would have. He knocked on the door forcefully, breaking the moment. Helena turned abruptly. The girl's eyes widened in fear at the figure of the blue Santa Claus invading the room. "Richard?" Helena recovered quickly. A perfect smile replaced the severe expression from seconds before. "What a wonderful surprise. Why didn't you say you were coming?" She moved to hug him, but Richard remained motionless, his eyes fixed on his daughters who were still paralyzed against the wall. "Santa brought presents," he said, trying to keep his voice light as he removed the fake beard. "I came to see my princesses." The girls didn't smile. They didn't run to hug him. They just exchanged quick glances, as if communicating something he couldn't understand. "Girls, it's Daddy," Helena said, with a sweetness that contrasted violently with the tone Richard had heard moments before. "Come give him a hug." Like obedient little soldiers, the twins advanced in sync and hugged him without emotion. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Where was the warmth, the spontaneity that should exist between a father and his daughters? He knelt, trying to look them in the eyes. "You've grown so much," he murmured, noticing the resemblance between them and the fragility in their gazes. "You're beautiful." "Thank you, Daddy," they replied in unison, as if they had rehearsed the line. Helena placed her hands on the girl's shoulders, a gesture that might have seemed affectionate to any observer. But Richard noticed how her fingers dug slightly into their delicate skin, a silent warning. "Why don't you go get ready for dinner? Daddy must be hungry after his trip." The twins left the room without looking back. Richard remained kneeling, feeling the weight of what he had just witnessed. "They're just shy," Helena said, closing the door. "You know how they are. Reserved like you." Richard stood up, studying his wife's perfectly made-up face. How had he not seen it before? How had he not noticed the signs in the video calls? in the always carefully arranged photos. "What was happening here when I arrived?" he asked directly. Helena laughed, a melodic and controlled sound. "Discipline, Richard. Something you've never understood." The girl spilled juice on the Persian rug. "They need to learn to be careful." They looked frightened. "Children need boundaries," she replied, adjusting her pearl necklace. "While you were building empires around the world, I took care of their education. They are polite, disciplined, and talented girls. You should be thanking me." Richard swallowed hard. He wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation, but something held him back. He needed to understand first. He needed to be sure. His mother's words before she died echoed in his memory. "Helena is not who you think she is, son. There's something wrong with her." He had ignored the warning, attributing it to the jealousy of a difficult mother-in-law. Now the weight of that dismissed doubt suffocated him. "I'm home now," he said finally. "And I plan to stay." A flicker of something, irritation, concern, crossed Helena's eyes before she recomposed her mask of the perfect wife. "How wonderful, darling. The girls will love having their father around." Dinner proceeded in an atmosphere of forced normality. Helena chatted animatedly about social events and charity projects. The twins ate in silence, their eyes occasionally rising to check their mother's reaction to each forkful. Richard watched everything, trying to decipher the dynamics of this family that was, in theory, his. Later, in the girls' room, an impeccably organized space, without the colorful chaos one would expect from 7-year-olds, Richard tried to get closer. "Can I read you a Christmas story?" The twins exchanged quick glances again, a silent communication that excluded their father. "Mommy doesn't like us to stay up late," said one of them, Clara, according to the name embroidered on her pajamas. "Just a short one," Richard insisted, taking a book from the meticulously organized shelf. The girls lay in their beds, stiff as little mummies. Richard began to read, watching how they seemed to relax gradually with the sound of his voice. When he reached the end, Olivia, the one who seemed more reserved, asked a question that took him by surprise. "Are you going away again, Daddy?" The question, asked in an almost inaudible whisper, carried a weight Richard hadn't expected. "No, Princess. I'm here to stay." "Mommy said you always say that," Clara commented, "but then you leave because you prefer your work." Richard felt his heart clench. What else had Helena told them during his absence? "This time is different," he assured them. "I promise." When he turned off the light and closed the door, Richard realized that something was deeply wrong in that house. The appearance of a perfect family hid something dark that he needed to uncover. And fast. In the living room, he found Helena arranging presents under the tree. "Are they asleep?" she asked without looking up. "Yes." "Good, we have a lot to talk about, don't we?" "Your sudden return. Your plans?" Richard watched his wife, realizing he had never truly known her. What was hidden behind that calculated smile? What price were his daughters paying daily in his absence? "Yes," he replied, determined. "We have a lot to talk about." On that Christmas Eve, as the city lit up with festive decorations and families celebrated togetherness, Richard faced the beginning of a battle he had never imagined he would have to fight. A battle for the souls of his daughters. Christmas morning dawned with an almost offensive brightness. Richard, who had barely slept, was staring at the ceiling of the guest room. Helena had suggested he rest there to not disturb her sleep routine when he heard movement in the hallway. He checked his watch. 6:30 a.m. He got up silently and opened the door a crack. In the hallway, the twins were walking towards the stairs, already perfectly dressed in identical green velvet dresses. There was none of the typical excitement of children on Christmas morning, eager to open presents. Just that military discipline that made Richard's stomach churn. "Good morning." "Princesses," he called, opening the door completely. The girls stopped, turning in sync like little soldiers. "Good morning." "Daddy," they replied in unison. "Are you going to open presents already?" Clara, Richard could now distinguish her by the small mole near her right eyebrow, shook her head. "Mommy said we have to have breakfast first, and practice piano for an hour." "Piano? On Christmas?" "Discipline doesn't take a holiday, Richard." Helena's voice came from the top of the stairs. She descended elegantly, wrapped in a silk robe, her hair perfectly coiffed despite the early hour. "The girls have an important performance on New Year's, the Foundation's charity recital, remember?" Richard nodded vaguely. Helena's foundation, the new Horizons Institute, was often mentioned in their conversations and video calls, a charitable organization that served underprivileged children, according to her. Another element that composed his wife's impeccable public image: businesswoman, philanthropist, dedicated mother. "We could make an exception today," Richard suggested, smiling at his daughters. "It's Christmas." A tense silence fell. The twins looked at their mother, whose smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course," Helena said finally, "but only half an hour of presents and then the piano. Commitments are commitments." Breakfast proceeded in an atmosphere of false harmony. Helena spoke animatedly about the year's social events, the Foundation's future projects, the girls' extra classes, ballet, piano, Mandarin. Richard listened attentively, searching for clues, trying to understand the dynamics of this house that seemed to run like a Swiss watch. When they finally went to the living room to open the presents, Richard observed how the twins unwrapped the packages methodically, without tearing the paper, thanking with rehearsed phrases for each new item. No shouts of joy or genuine surprise. "Did you like what Santa brought?" he asked, trying to inject some spontaneity into the mechanical ritual. Olivia, holding an expensive doll, nodded obediently. "It's very beautiful, thank you. And you, Clara?" The girl hesitated for a second, looking at the storybook in her hands. "I liked it too, Daddy." It was at that moment that Richard noticed. When Clara extended her arms to show the book, the sleeve of her dress rode up slightly, revealing reddish marks on her delicate wrist. Marks that looked like fingerprints. His blood ran cold. He tried to keep his expression neutral as he approached, pretending to examine the book. "I'm glad you like it. It looks like a very interesting book." Gently, he touched the girl's wrist. "What happened here, Princess?" Clara pulled her arm back quickly, pulling down her sleeve. "Nothing. I fell in ballet class." Helena appeared beside them with a camera. "Let's capture this moment." The first Christmas morning with the family reunited in years. The girls immediately struck poses for the photo, automatic smiles on their faces. Richard tried to reciprocate, but his mind was focused on those marks. After the girls went to the music room to begin their piano practice, Richard took the opportunity to explore the house he had once known so well. Everything was different, colder, more organized, like a decoration showroom and not a home. In Helena's office, he tried to access the computer, but it was password protected. In the kitchen, he found Rose, the housekeeper who had worked for the family since before the twins were born. "Rose," he called, making sure they were alone. "How have the girls been?" The woman, who had always been warm, now seemed withdrawn. "They're fine, sir. Growing up fast." "Rose, how long have you worked for us?" 12 years. "Almost 13, sir." "Then be honest with me. There's something wrong in this house, isn't there?" Rose glanced nervously at the door. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir." The girls. They seemed different, frightened. The housekeeper began washing dishes with unnecessary vigor. "Children change, sir. You've been away a long time. I saw marks on Clara's wrist." Rose stopped, her hands still in the water. When she turned, her eyes were teary. "I can't talk about that, sir. I need this job." Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm asking you as a father, Rose. What is happening to my daughters?" The housekeeper took a deep breath, looking at the door again. "Mrs. Helena. She has her own methods of education. She demands perfection." "The girl," she hesitated. "The girls do their best to please her. Does she hurt them?" Rose looked down. "It's not for me to say, sir." "Rose, please. There are good days and bad days. When Mrs. Helena is stressed, things can get difficult. The girls have learned to be cautious." The sound of the piano drifted faintly from the music room, a perfect melody, without mistakes, played by hands too small to carry such pressure. "Does anyone else know about this? Has a doctor ever examined the girls?" Rose shook her head. "Mrs. Helena has a trusted doctor, Dr. Allen. He comes to the house when necessary." Richard felt a wave of guilt and anger. How had he let this happen? How had he not seen the signs? "I'm going to fix this, Rose, I promise." The housekeeper looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "Be careful, sir. Mrs. Helena has many allies, important people." When Richard left the kitchen, he found Helena standing in the hallway, watching him with cold eyes, chatting with the staff so early. "Always so democratic, Richard." He held her gaze. "I was just asking for coffee. I can't sleep well in strange beds." "This was your home for years," she replied with a calculated smile. "For you can hardly call it strange." "A lot has changed, Helena." "Yes, including you." She adjusted the collar of her impeccable blouse. "We're having lunch with my parents today." "Did I forget to mention? They're anxious to see you after all this time." His in-laws, Victor and Agnes Caldwell, the aristocratic family who had never really accepted him, the self-made businessman who had won their only daughter's heart. Or so he had thought, of course. "It will be great to see them again." Helena smiled, that smile that didn't reach her eyes. "They're very involved in the girls' lives. Victor is practically a second father to them." The message was clear. You are dispensable, replaceable. They filled your void. The rest of the day unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Lunch at the Caldwell mansion, with its excessive formalities. The twins behaving like little ladies, answering only when spoken to directly. Victor with his barely concealed disdain, asking questions about Richard's business, with the clear intention of reminding him that he had chosen his career over his family. "So you've finally decided to come back," Victor commented over digestives, after the women had retired to the drawing room. "I must say it's surprising. Helena told us you were building a new venture in Asia." "I changed my mind," Richard replied simply. "I realized I was missing what was most important." His father-in-law laughed, a humorless sound. "A little late, don't you think? The girls barely know you. Helena practically raised them alone, with our help, of course." Richard felt his blood boil but maintained his composure. "It's never too late to fix mistakes, Victor." "Some mistakes can't be fixed, Richard." The older man leaned in, lowering his voice. "Helena has built a stable life for the girls. A reputation, a promising future. It would be a shame if someone destabilized that." The veiled threat hung in the air like a toxic perfume. When they finally returned to the mansion, it was already evening. The twins, exhausted from the formal day, were taken for their bath by Rose, while Helena retreated to her office, mentioning some urgent emails from the foundation. Richard took the opportunity to go into his daughter's room. In the dim light, he observed the overly organized environment, with no trace of the natural messiness of childhood. On the walls, instead of colorful posters or drawings, were sophisticated paintings. On the bookshelf, educational books were lined up by size. Opening one of the dresser drawers, he found, hidden under piles of folded socks, a notebook. Inside there were drawings, the only signs of genuine childish expression in that sterile environment. But the content made his heart sink. Dark figures with large eyes watching two small girls. A house that looked like a prison. Enormous hands holding what appeared to be ropes or chains. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made him quickly put the notebook away. Seconds later, the twins entered, already in their pajamas, their hair damp from their bath. "Hi, Daddy," Clara said shyly. "I was waiting to say good night," he replied, smiling. "May I?" The girls nodded, getting into their beds. Richard sat between them, feeling a lump in his throat. "You know I love you, don't you?" he asked softly. Olivia, always the quieter one, glanced at the door before answering. "Mummy said you love your work more." "Mummy is mistaken," he replied, stroking his daughter's hair. "Nothing is more important than you two. Nothing." A heavy silence settled in the room, until Clara asked in an almost inaudible whisper, "Are you really going to stay this time?" "I am, and I'm going to take care of you. I promise." When Richard finally left his daughter's room, he found Helena in the hallway, looking at him with an indescribable expression. "Bonding?" she asked with false lightness. "Trying to get to know my daughters," he replied, holding her gaze. "Is there something wrong with that?" Helena moved closer, her expensive perfume enveloping him like a trap. "Absolutely not. As long as it doesn't interfere with the education I've established. After all, you abdicated that role years ago, didn't you?" That night, lying again in the guest room, Richard made a silent promise to his daughters and to himself. He would uncover the whole truth, no matter how painful, and find a way to save them. Even if it meant facing not only Helena, but the entire empire of appearances she had built. What he didn't know was how deep the web of manipulation he was about to step into really was. The next 3 days became an exercise in meticulous observation for Richard. Like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture, He analyzed every interaction between Helena and the twins, every exchanged glance, every unspoken word. The house operated with the precision of a Swiss watch, rigid schedules for meals, studies, extracurricular activities, and over everything hung Helena's watchful presence. It was the third day after Christmas when Richard decided he needed concrete evidence. Taking advantage of Helena's departure for a foundation meeting, he drove to the nearest electronics store and bought discreet micro-surveillance cameras. He needed proof, something more substantial than his suspicions and his daughter's disturbing drawings. Upon his return, he found Rose tidying the girls' room. "They're at ballet class," the housekeeper explained, meticulously folding small white socks. "They'll be back at 5 on the dot." Richard closed the door. "Rose, I need your help." The woman immediately looked apprehensive. "Sir?" "I want to install security cameras in the house discreetly." Rose turned pale. "Mrs. Helena would not approve of that." "That's exactly why I need your help, so she doesn't find out." The housekeeper placed the socks on the bed, her hands trembling. "Why are you doing this, sir?" Richard moved closer, lowering his voice. "Because I know something is wrong in this house. I saw the marks on Clara. I see how they behave, like machines, not like children. I need to know what happens when I'm not around." Rose remained silent for long seconds, the conflict evident on her aged face. "Mrs. Helena has two sides," she said finally. "When she's pleased, she can be kind, even generous. But when something displeases her," she hesitated, "the girls have learned to predict her moods, to behave accordingly. Does she hurt them?" Rose averted her gaze. "Not with explosive violence. It's more calculated. Cold discipline. Punishments that don't leave visible marks. Deprivation, isolation, sometimes physical pressure, holding an arm too tightly, squeezing shoulders until it hurts." Richard's stomach tightened. "Why didn't you ever report it?" "To whom?" "The Caldwell family has too much influence in this city. And Mrs. Helena is seen as a role model. Businesswoman, philanthropist, dedicated mother. Who would believe it?" Richard knew she was right. Helena had carefully constructed her public image. Any accusation would seem absurd without concrete proof. "Will you help me?" Rose hesitated but finally nodded. The girls deserve a chance to be real children. In the hours that followed, while the twins were still at class and Helena at her meeting, Richard and Rose discreetly installed small cameras in strategic points of the house. The living room, hallways, the girls' room, Helena's office, all connected to Richard's phone. "Where does Mrs. Helena usually discipline them?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Usually in the master bedroom closet. She says it's to avoid making a scene." Richard felt a wave of nausea but installed a camera there as well, hidden among designer shoeboxes. When they finished, Rose looked nervous. "If she finds out, she won't, and if she does, I'll take full responsibility." As he put away the equipment, Richard noticed Rose's gaze fixed on the window. "Is there anything else I should know, Rose?" The housekeeper sighed deeply. "The donations. Donations. For the foundation. Mrs. Helena always talks about them, but..." She hesitated. "Once I found strange documents while cleaning the office. Large transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands. The foundation's name was on it, but it seemed off." Richard frowned. "You think Helena is embezzling money from her own foundation?" "I don't know, sir. I just found it strange. And after that, she changed the computer password and started locking the office all the time. A new piece of the puzzle." Richard thanked and dismissed Rose, who left still looking worried. Alone, he went to Helena's office. The door was locked, as Rose had said. Using skills he hadn't practiced since his rebellious teenage years, he managed to open it with a paperclip. The office was a perfect reflection of Helena, elegant, meticulously organized with no room for imperfection. Richard turned on the computer, facing the password screen. He tried a few obvious combinations, the twins' birthday, their wedding date, without success. Frustrated, he started going through the drawers. In the third one, he found a folder with bank statements. Regular transfers to an account in the Caymans, as Rose had mentioned. The amount was always the same, $75,000 monthly. The beneficiary, New Paths Foundation Special Program. Richard photographed the documents with his phone. Continuing his search, He found a small leather-bound diary in a false bottom of the desk drawer. He hesitated before opening it. It felt like an invasion of privacy. But his concern for his daughters overcame his scruples. The content made his blood run cold. They were not personal reflections or intimate confessions. They were meticulous notes about the twins, problematic behaviors, punishments applied, progress in discipline. Everything was described with the coldness of a scientific report. Olivia refused to finish her soup at dinner. Consequence: no dinner for 2 days. Clara cried during piano lesson. Consequence: 2 additional hours of daily practice for 1 week. The notes dated back 3 years when the twins were only 4. Richard felt a mixture of horror and profound guilt. How had he not noticed? How had he allowed this to happen? The sound of an approaching car alerted him. Quickly, he photographed a few pages of the diary, put it back in its hiding place, and left the office, making sure to lock the door again. In the hall, he met the twins returning from ballet class, accompanied by the driver. They were impeccable in their pink leotards, their hair in perfect buns, not a strand out of place. "How was class, princesses?" he asked, trying to sound casual despite his inner turmoil. The girls exchanged quick glances before Clara replied, "It was good, Daddy." "We learned a new choreography," Olivia added shyly. "I'd love to see it sometime. Maybe you can show me." Again, that exchanged look, that silent communication. "If Mommy lets us," Clara replied. Richard crouched down to their level. "What if it's our secret? Just for Daddy to see?" The girl's eyes widened slightly. Fear? Surprise? Richard couldn't tell. "Mommy says secrets are wrong," Olivia murmured. "Not all secrets," he replied softly. "Some are like special surprises. Like when you make a drawing to give as a gift and don't tell them beforehand." The twins seemed to consider the idea, but then Rose appeared to take them for their bath. Richard watched them go up the stairs, noticing how their steps were identical, synchronized, as if any individual movement was forbidden. That night at dinner, Helena spoke at length about the success of the foundation meeting, about new partnerships, about the charity gala that would take place in 2 weeks. "It will be the event of the year," she declared, meticulously cutting her steak. "All the top names in society will be there. The twins will give a piano performance." Richard watched his daughters, who ate in silence, back straight, napkins perfectly placed on their laps. "Isn't that a lot of pressure for such young children?" Helena smiled, that smile that never reached her eyes. "They're used to it, and they're talented. Aren't you, girls?" "Yes, Mommy," they replied in unison. "Maybe we should let them choose if they want to perform," Richard suggested. Helena's smile hardened. "They've already chosen. Haven't you, Clara, Olivia?" The twins nodded, their eyes downcast. After dinner, while Helena dealt with some emergency on the phone, Richard managed a moment alone with his daughters in the living room. "Do you really like playing the piano in public?" he asked directly. Clara glanced quickly at the door before answering. "Mummy says it's important to show our talent." "But do you like it?" Olivia, always the more reticent one, shrugged slightly. "It's scary sometimes, all those people watching. And what if you make a mistake?" Richard asked, dreading the answer. The silence that followed was answer enough. Finally, Clara whispered, "Mommy gets disappointed." And when she gets disappointed, the sentence hung in the air, laden with meanings Richard was beginning to understand. Later, alone in the guest room, Richard reviewed the camera footage on his phone. Nothing unusual so far, just the meticulous routine of the house. He decided to look into Helena's foundation's finances. Using his contacts in the financial market, he requested a discreet investigation into the New Horizons Institute and the mysterious account in the Caymans. The reply arrived by email a few hours later, decrypted with a password only he and his contact knew. The foundation legally exists and has all certifications. It receives substantial donations from the local elite. However, we found no records of many of the programs advertised in its promotional material. The Cayman account is linked to a holding company registered in the name of Agnes Caldwell, Helena's mother. The use of these funds is unclear. Richard felt like he was uncovering layer after layer of an elaborate lie. It wasn't just about the cruelty to the twins. There was something bigger, more complex. The next morning, taking advantage of Helena having taken the girls to a rehearsal at the foundation, Richard paid an unexpected visit to the New Horizons Institute headquarters. located in an imposing building in the capital's financial district. He was greeted by an efficient secretary who, upon hearing he was Helena's husband, immediately became solicitous. "Mrs. Miller mentioned you were traveling," she commented, leading him through the luxuriously decorated office. "I came back to spend the holidays with my family," Richard replied casually. "Helena talked so much about the foundation, I wanted to see it for myself." The visit partially confirmed his suspicions. The foundation clearly existed and did some legitimate work. There were photos of events, official documents, even a few children in a room receiving tutoring. But something felt artificial, like a well-staged set. "And where is the special program located?" he asked, feigning knowledge. The secretary looked confused. "Special program? I'm not familiar with that name, sir." "I see. It must be one of Helena's more recent projects. She mentioned it operated at a different address." The woman quickly checked her computer. "I don't see any program with that name in our records. Perhaps Mrs. Miller can clarify when she arrives." Richard thanked her and left, claiming another appointment. In the car, he tried to organize his thoughts. The foundation was partially legitimate, but there was clearly something happening behind the scenes. Money being diverted to an international account, a mysterious program not listed in the official records. Checking his phone, he noticed a notification from the cameras. Opening the app, he saw Helena returning with the twins. Clara seemed to be crying while Olivia kept her head down. Richard's heart raced. He watched Helena lead Clara into the master bedroom closet, while ordering Olivia to wait in the room. The sound was low, but he could hear fragments of the conversation. Public embarrassment, unforgivable mistake, consequences. Richard turned up the volume, his hands trembling. "Mommy, please," Clara pleaded. "It was just one wrong note." "Just one note?" Helena's voice was cold, controlled. "It was the same note I corrected yesterday. And the day before. You aren't even trying. What will people think at the gala?" "I am trying, Mommy. I promise I'll practice more." "Promises aren't enough, Clara. You know how this works." Richard watched in horror as Helena opened a box hidden at the back of the closet. From inside, she took out what looked like a thin wooden ruler. Hands. With resignation, Clara held out her hands, palms up. Richard couldn't watch anymore. He turned off the app, feeling physically ill. He had his evidence now, clear, irrefutable. Helena was methodically abusing her daughters under the guise of discipline. He drove quickly back to the mansion, determined to confront her, to take the girls away immediately. But as he parked, he saw Victor Caldwell's car at the entrance. His father-in-law had arrived, complicating his plans. Richard took a deep breath, trying to control the rage boiling inside him. He needed to be strategic. A direct confrontation now with Victor present could backfire. Helena and her parents were a powerful trio in local society. He needed a better plan. Entering the house, he found everyone in the living room. Helena was elegantly serving tea, as if nothing had happened minutes before. Clara was sitting rigidly on the sofa, her hands carefully hidden under a book. Olivia was looking out the window, seemingly absorbed in the garden view, but Richard could see the tension in her small shoulders. "Richard!" Helena exclaimed with false cheer. "What a surprise. I thought you were meeting with your lawyers today." Victor stood for a formal handshake. "We were just discussing the Foundation's gala, an important event for the family's image." Richard forced a smile, feeling the weight of the word image. It was all about appearances in this family. The perfect image, absolute control, what others would think. And at that moment, looking at his daughter's tense faces, at Helena's calculated smile, at Victor's arrogance, Richard understood that he was about to enter the fight of his life. A battle not just for the custody of the twins, but for their very souls. The lawyer, Mark Langley, listened attentively as Richard explained the situation, occasionally taking notes in his black-covered notebook. The office on the 20th floor of a commercial building offered a panoramic view of the capital, but neither man paid attention to the urban landscape. "So you have video evidence," Mark summarized after Richard finished his account. "And suspicious financial documents." "Yes, and the housekeeper's testimony, although she's too terrified to come forward officially." Mark leaned back in his leather chair, assessing the situation. He was one of the most respected lawyers in family law, known for his discretion and effectiveness. Richard had chosen him carefully, making sure he had no connections to the Caldwell family. I'll be honest with you, Richard. We have a case, but it won't be easy. Mark laced his fingers on the desk. Helena has an impeccable public image. Philanthropist, successful businesswoman, seemingly dedicated mother. The Caldwells have considerable influence in the city. Judges, politicians, the press, they all admire them. And I'm the absent father who abandoned his family to make a fortune abroad, Richard completed bitterly. Exactly. In the public eye, you're the villain of the story. Aunt Helena will play that card masterfully. Richard ran his hands over his face, tired. It had been a week since he had installed the cameras, and each new recording confirmed his worst fears. Helena's methodical cruelty towards the twins was not an isolated event, but a consistent pattern, always away from prying eyes, always disguised as discipline. So what do you suggest? Mark leaned forward. First, continue gathering evidence, but carefully. If Helena discovers the cameras, you'll lose that advantage and could face legal trouble for invasion of privacy. And then? We need to build a solid case before any legal action, and prepare a safe environment for the girls, because when you make your move, Helena will react, and it won't be pretty. Richard nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. I have an apartment downtown that I bought as an investment. It's furnished, ready to be occupied. Good. Now, about the financial evidence. We need to better understand what's happening with this special program. I already have someone looking into that discreetly. Mark made a few more notes. One last thing, Richard. You need to build a stronger relationship with your daughters before any legal action. Judges highly value the emotional stability of children. If you're a stranger to them, your chances decrease considerably. The observation hit Richard like a punch. It was true. He was still practically a stranger to Clara and Olivia. In just 1 week, he had managed small moments of connection. But the girls remained cautious, programmed to act according to Helena's rigid rules. How do I do that when Helena controls every minute of their routine? Find openings. Create opportunities. We don't have much time, but every small bond you establish will be crucial. When Richard returned to the mansion that afternoon, he found unusual activity. Staff were arranging tables in the garden. Floral arrangements were arriving in abundance. Rose explained when she saw his confusion. Mrs. Helena is organizing a charity tea for tomorrow to raise funds for the foundation. She didn't mention anything. The housekeeper shrugged discreetly. It was decided yesterday after you left. She said it was an opportunity to reintroduce you to local society. Richard felt a chill. Helena was moving her pieces on the board, presenting him to her social circle, controlling the narrative. He needed to be prepared. He found Helena in her office on the phone, coordinating the final details of the event. She held up a finger, asking him to wait, as she finished the call with precise orders about the menu. Ah, Richard, she said finally, placing the phone on the desk. Where have you been all day? Taking care of some of my investment matters here, he replied, keeping it vague. I heard about the tea tomorrow. Helena smiled, that calculated smile he was beginning to detest. Yes, a small gathering. I thought it would be good for you to meet our social circle, since you plan to stay. The girls will give a short piano performance. Do they know that? Of course. They're rehearsing right now. As if to confirm her words, the notes of a piano drifted faintly to them. Richard recognized the piece, something by Chopin far too complex for 7-year-olds. Don't you think you're pushing them too hard? They just performed at Christmas. Helena laughed lightly. You've been away a long time, Richard. You don't understand how their education works. Constant practice is essential. And what if they don't want to perform? Helena's smile hardened. They want to. And they will be delighted to show their talent to our friends. Now, if you'll excuse me, I still have much to organize. It was a clear dismissal. Richard left the office and followed the sound of the piano to the music room. Through the ajar door, he saw Olivia at the piano, her small fingers moving over the keys with mechanical precision. Clara stood beside her, turning the pages of the sheet music. Both looked exhausted. Richard entered silently, watching them for a moment before speaking. That sounds wonderful, princesses. The girls started. Olivia immediately stopped playing, as if she had been caught doing something wrong. Don't stop on my account, he said quickly. I just wanted to listen. Clara glanced at the door, checking if Helena was nearby. Mummy told us to practice until she comes back. How long have you been here? Olivia shrugged. Since lunch. Richard looked at the clock. It was almost 5 in the afternoon. That's a long time without a break. Why don't you take one? We can have a snack in the garden. Again, that exchange of glances between the twins, that silent communication. Mommy will be angry, Clara murmured. I'll talk to her. I'm your father, remember? I can make decisions too. It was the first time he saw them genuinely smile. Small, hesitant smiles as if they weren't sure it was allowed. But still, real smiles. In the garden, sitting on a bench far from the preparations for the next day's event, Richard tried to establish a deeper connection with his daughters. He discovered that Clara secretly liked adventure stories, not the literary classics Helena insisted they read. Olivia in turn confessed in a whisper that she preferred drawing to playing the piano but had never told her mother. And if you could choose what to do tomorrow, what would it be? Richard asked. The question seemed to confuse them. The idea of choice was clearly a foreign concept. Could we go to the park? Clara suggested shyly, as if testing boundaries. Or watch a movie, Olivia added, gaining courage from her sister's suggestion. Richard felt his heart ache. Such simple wishes, so normal for children, yet presented as bold, almost transgressive requests. We can do both, he replied. After your mother's tea, of course. The joy on the girls' faces was instantly replaced by apprehension. What if we make a mistake in the performance? Clara asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Richard placed his hands on his daughter's delicate shoulders. Then it's no problem. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes. Even me. Mommy doesn't make mistakes, Olivia observed. Mommy makes mistakes too, Richard replied firmly. She just doesn't admit it. That small conversation in the garden was interrupted by Helena's arrival. She appeared on the terrace doorway with a disapproving expression. What are you doing out here? Olivia should be practicing. Richard stood up, instinctively positioning himself between Helena and the girls. I gave them a break. They've been rehearsing for hours. That's not for you to decide. Richard, I'm their father. A father who's been absent for years. Helena retorted, her social smile now completely gone. You don't know what's best for them. And punishing them for a mistake on the piano is? Helena paled slightly but recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Girls, back to the music room, now. The twins stood up immediately, conditioned to obey. Before they left, Richard managed to whisper, Remember, everyone makes mistakes sometimes. When they were alone, Helena approached, her eyes as cold as ice. What do you think you're doing? Being a father. Something I should have been doing a long time ago. Don't confuse things, Richard. You may be back, but nothing has changed. This house, the girls, everything is still under my rules. And what if I don't agree with those rules? Helena smiled, a smile that held no trace of humor. Then we'll have a problem. And you don't want that, believe me. I've spent years building a reputation in this city. While you were... Where was it? Singapore? Hong Kong? I don't even remember anymore. That doesn't erase the fact that I'm their father. On paper, yes. But in practice? Helena adjusted the perfectly positioned pearl necklace on her neck. Who do you think a judge would favor? The dedicated mother who sacrificed a promising career to raise her daughters, or the absent father who suddenly decided to play house? The threat was clear. Helena was prepared for a legal battle if necessary. And she was right. In the public eye, she was the victim, the devoted mother abandoned by her ambitious husband. Things aren't always what they seem, Helena, Richard replied calmly. Sometimes the truth comes out. Something in his tone made Helena frown slightly. What do you mean by that? Nothing specific, just an observation. A tense silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sound of the piano being played again. Tomorrow's tea starts at 3, Helena said finally, resuming her perfect hostess posture. Dress appropriately. Many important people will be present. Don't embarrass me. After she walked away, Richard remained in the garden, watching the event preparations. Helena was right on one point. He was the stranger here, the outsider trying to break into a world carefully constructed during his absence. He would need more than good intentions to win this battle. The evening arrived with a palpable tension in the house. During dinner, Helena spoke animatedly about the next day's event, about important guests, about how the twins should behave. The girls responded mechanically, eyes downcast, absorbing every instruction like little soldiers preparing for a mission. Richard watched everything, planning his next moves. After dinner, when Helena retreated for some important phone calls, he took the opportunity to check the cameras on his phone. Nothing unusual that night, just the meticulous routine of the house. It was when he checked his email that he found new information. His investigator had discovered something about the Foundation's special program. I gained access to the bank records of the Cayman account. The money is used for payments to several people, mainly doctors, therapists, and, interestingly, a family court judge. There are also regular transfers to a private clinic in a coastal city. The clinic officially belongs to a doctor named Alan Shaw, but the real owners seem to be Agnes and Victor Caldwell. Richard frowned. Why would his in-laws secretly own a clinic, and why would a family court judge be receiving payments? A name caught his attention. Dr. Alan Shaw. Rose had mentioned a Dr. Alan as the trusted doctor Helena called when necessary. The pieces were starting to fit, though the puzzle still seemed incomplete. He replied to the email, asking for more information about the clinic and its patients if possible. He needed to understand what was really going on. The next morning, the mansion was a whirlwind of activity. Staff rushed back and forth, organizing the final details of the charity tea. Helena supervised everything with military precision, occasionally reprimanding some detail that didn't meet her perfectionist standards. The twins were subjected to an exhausting preparation routine. Perfectly coiffed hair, identical light blue silk dresses, shiny patent leather shoes. They looked like little porcelain dolls, not 7-year-old children. Richard tried to approach them during the morning, but Helena was always present, monitoring every interaction, inserting herself into every conversation. It was as if she had erected an invisible wall between him and his daughters. When the first guests began to arrive, Richard strategically positioned himself beside Helena, determined to closely observe her social interactions. His wife transformed into the perfect hostess. Radiant smile, elegant gestures, intelligent conversations about art, philanthropy, and child education. "Richard, we finally meet the mysterious husband," exclaimed an elegant lady, whom Helena introduced as the mayor's wife. "Helena always talks about you, but I confess we were beginning to think you were her invention." Richard forced a smile. "Work kept me away longer than I would have liked, but now I'm back for good. How wonderful. Helena has done an incredible job with the foundation and with the girls. They're true prodigies, you know. So disciplined for their age." "Yes, I've noticed," Richard replied, watching his daughters from across the garden, posing stiffly for photos with other guests. The afternoon proceeded like a well-rehearsed play. The twins were introduced to everyone as examples of excellence, polite, talented, obedient. When it was time for the piano performance, Richard felt his stomach clench with anxiety. Olivia sat at the instrument, Clara beside her to turn the pages. The garden fell silent as the first chords of Chopin filled the air. The technique was impeccable, surprising for such young children. But Richard, watching closely, could see the tension in their small shoulders, the fear in their eyes concentrated on the keys. In the middle of the piece, it happened. A mistake, small, almost imperceptible to most listeners. But Richard saw the panic in Olivia's eyes, the quick glance towards Helena, who watched from the front row with a frozen smile. The girl recovered quickly and finished the piece, receiving enthusiastic applause from the guests, who approached to praise the extraordinary talent. As people surrounded the twins, Richard watched Helena lean in discreetly to whisper something in Olivia's ear. The girl's expression changed instantly, from relief at the end of the performance to something close to terror. Richard tried to approach, but was intercepted by Victor Caldwell and some businessmen who wanted to discuss deals. By the time he could break free, the twins had disappeared, presumably taken inside the house by Helena. He found them in the music room, sitting rigidly on the piano bench while Helena, standing before them, spoke in a low, controlled voice. A disgrace. Weeks of practice and still... Richard entered without knocking. They were wonderful. Everyone loved it. Helena turned, surprised by the interruption. "We're in the middle of a private conversation, Richard." I noticed. A conversation that was terrifying our daughters over a tiny mistake that no one even noticed. It's not about what others noticed. It's about excellence, a concept you clearly don't understand. Richard approached the girls, You were perfect, princesses. I'm so proud. The twins' eyes lit up briefly at his words, words they probably rarely heard. Richard, we have guests waiting, Helena said, her falsely sweet tone returning to her voice. Why don't you go back to the garden while the girls practice a little more? They've already performed. They deserve to rest and enjoy the party like any normal child. A tense silence fell between them. The twins watched wide-eyed the silent battle unfolding. Normal? Helena repeated with a slight disdain. Our daughters are not normal, Richard. They are exceptional, and I intend to keep them that way. At the cost of their childhood. Their happiness? Helena smiled coldly. Happiness is an overrated concept. What I'm giving them is much more valuable. Excellence, discipline, a brilliant future. You're creating puppets, not children, Richard replied, keeping his voice low but firm. And that ends today. Something in Helena's eyes shifted, a flicker of something close to fear, quickly replaced by cold determination. Be careful with your threats, Richard. You have no idea who you're dealing with. But Richard did. And more he was beginning to understand the extent of the web Helena had woven around him. 3 days had passed since the charity tea, and the tension in the mansion was palpable. Richard and Helena rarely spoke to each other, beyond what was strictly necessary, communicating mainly through fake smiles and empty formalities in the presence of others. It was a domestic Cold War, with the twins as the disputed territory. That morning, Richard received a call from his investigator, Theo, requesting an urgent meeting. They arranged a neutral location, a discreet cafe in the capital's commercial center, far from the watchful eyes of the society that orbited the Caldwells. What did you find? Richard asked as soon as they sat at a secluded table. Theo, a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance, his greatest professional asset, slid a folder across the table. The clinic. I got more information. Richard opened the folder, finding photographs of an elegant seaside complex surrounded by high walls and conspicuous security. It looked more like an exclusive resort than a medical facility. Officially, it's a rehabilitation clinic for high-level executives, Theo explained, keeping his voice low. Stress, burnout, discrete substance abuse, the kind of problems wealthy people want to solve away from the public eye. And unofficially, that's where things get interesting. Theo pointed to another photograph showing an isolated area of the complex. This section is separate from the rest. Reinforced security, extremely restricted access. The official records mention nothing about this area, but I managed to talk to a former employee. And they call it the Special Wing. It's for problem cases, children and teenagers from influential families. Behaviors considered deviant, rebellion, anything that tarnishes the perfect family image. Richard felt a chill. What kind of treatment do they offer? The former employee didn't have direct access, but he mentioned intensive therapy, liberal use of psychiatric medication, and something called behavioral reconditioning. Theo paused. In essence, they break these kids' spirits until they become what their parents want. Richard closed his eyes for a moment, processing the information. And the connection to Helena's foundation. The special program seems to be a front to finance this operation. Officially, they raise funds for underprivileged youth with behavioral problems. In practice, the money keeps this secret wing running. And the family court judge? He facilitates involuntary commitment processes when needed, signs the papers without question, ensures that any complaints of mistreatment are dismissed. Richard closed the folder, feeling sick. Is there more? Theo hesitated. I got a partial list of patients who have been through the special wing in recent years. Most are teenagers, but he pulled out another sheet from the folder. This name caught my attention. Richard looked at the paper and felt his blood run cold. Clara Miller. Date of admission 3 years ago. Duration 8 weeks. She was only 4 years old, Richard murmured, his voice thick with anger and guilt. What justification could they give for admitting a 4-year-old child? The official diagnosis was oppositional defiant disorder and severe disruptive tendencies, signed by Dr. Alan Shaw. Richard remembered video calls from that period. Helena had said Clara was at a special immersion school. He had believed her, too busy with negotiations in Singapore to question further. Olivia isn't on the list, Theo noted. At least not the one I could access. Maybe that's why they're so different, Richard murmured, more to himself than to the investigator. Clara was unbroken. Olivia learned by watching. The realization of what had happened, of what Helena had done, settled on Richard like a physical weight. His daughter, his little Clara, institutionalized for months in a facility where they reconditioned children. And he hadn't even known. "I need more," he said finally, looking up at Theo. "Medical records, testimonies, anything I can use in court." "I'm trying, but the place is a fortress. The Caldwells don't leave trails easily." "Keep trying. Money is no object." When Richard returned to the mansion that afternoon, he looked at the imposing building with new eyes. It wasn't just an opulent house, but a gilded cage. And inside, Helena wasn't just a controlling wife, but something much more sinister. He found the twins in the library, studying Mandarin with a private tutor. He watched them for a moment before entering. Their identical posture, their perfectly coiffed hair, their absolute concentration. Only small details set them apart. The way Olivia lightly bit her lip when concentrating. The way Clara held her pencil with unnecessary force. "Can we take a break?" Richard asked, entering the room. "I need to talk to my daughters." The tutor looked hesitant. Mrs. Miller gave specific instructions about the schedule. "I'll take responsibility," he replied firmly. "Please give us a few minutes." When the tutor left, Richard sat between the girls, searching for the right words. How do you ask a child about a trauma she was likely conditioned not to mention? "Do you like studying this much?" he began gently. The twins exchanged a quick glance before Clara replied, "It's important for our future, Daddy." Rehearsed lines aside, "I want to know what you really feel." Another silence, another exchanged look. "Sometimes it's tiring," Olivia admitted finally in a whisper. "But Mommy says we have to be the best." "And what happens when you're not the best?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Richard took a deep breath. "Clara, do you remember when you were 4? A place where you stayed for a while, away from home?" The reaction was immediate and alarming. The girl turned pale, her eyes wide with panic. Olivia instinctively grabbed her sister's hand. "We're not supposed to talk about that," Clara murmured, glancing nervously at the door. "Mommy said it was a secret." Richard felt his heart ache. "You can tell me, Princess. I'm your father. I'm here to protect you." Clara shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I can't. If I talk, they'll take me away again." "No one is going to take you anywhere," Richard assured her, gently holding his daughter's hands. "I promise." "You don't understand," Olivia intervened, surprising him with the intensity in her usually soft voice. "Mommy always keeps her promises, always. When she says she'll do something, she does it." "What kind of things does she promise?" Another exchanged look between the twins. "That if we're not perfect, if we don't follow the rules, we'll go to the special place," Clara finally answered, the words coming out in an almost inaudible breath. "Where disobedient children learn to behave." Richard fought to contain the rage growing inside him. "And what was that place like, Clara?" "Do you remember?" The girl trembled visibly. "It was cold. The people wore white clothes. There was medicine that made me sleepy, and a dark room where they put me when I cried or screamed." Every word was like a knife in Richard's heart. His daughter, so small, subjected to such cruelty. "Was Clara the only one who went?" he asked softly, looking at Olivia. "I visited once," Olivia replied, her eyes downcast. "Mommy took me to show me what would happen if I didn't behave like Clara did after she came back." Helena's method became clear in its terrible effectiveness. Using one twin to break the other, a living mirror of what could happen. "Listen carefully," Richard said, moving closer to his daughters. "No one is going to send you anywhere again, no one. I won't allow it. But Mommy, your mother isn't right about everything, even if she thinks she is. And what she did, what she's doing, is not normal or acceptable." The girls seemed simultaneously terrified and relieved, as if a truth they had always known instinctively was finally being confirmed by an adult. "What's going to happen now?" Clara asked. Richard hesitated. He didn't want to frighten them with details of court battles or custody removal. "We're going to fix this together. Do you trust me?" The twins exchanged that communicative look again, before nodding shyly. It was a start, however fragile. The sound of heels in the hallway alerted them to Helena's approach. Richard quickly changed the subject, picking up one of the Mandarin workbooks from the table. "So this is how you write it." Impressive. Helena entered, assessing the scene with suspicious eyes. The lesson was supposed to continue for another half-hour. I asked for a break, Richard replied casually. I wanted to see what they're learning. The Kausi tutor didn't mention that when I saw her in the hall. Maybe she forgot. Helena narrowed her eyes but kept her tone controlled in the presence of her daughters. Well, the break is over. Girls, continue studying. Richard, we need to talk about the Foundation's gala. It's next week. In her office, Helena closed the door before turning to him, her social smile completely gone. What were you really talking about with the girls? First, just getting to know my daughters, Helena. Is there something wrong with that? It depends on the topics discussed. She moved closer, her eyes cold as ice. I hope you weren't filling their heads with inappropriate ideas. Like what? Girls like the notion that discipline and excellence aren't important. Like the fantasy that they can be average and still be successful. Richard observed his wife, the perfect posture, the absolute control, the calculated coldness in the eyes he had once found intense and passionate. When did you change so much, Helena? Or were you always like this and I just never noticed? She smiled slightly. People show what others want to see, Richard. You wanted a beautiful, sociable wife who wouldn't interfere with your grand plans. That's what I gave you. Meanwhile, I built my own legacy. Using our daughters as experiments? Something dangerous flashed in Helena's eyes. Be careful with your accusations. Everything I did was for their own good. This world doesn't forgive weakness or mediocrity. I am preparing them to win, at the cost of their childhood, their happiness, by committing a 4-year-old to a psychiatric clinic because she didn't behave exactly as you wanted. Helena paled slightly but recovered almost instantly. I see you've been digging. That's not wise of you, Richard. I know about the clinic, about the special program, about how you use the foundation to fund that horrible place. Horrible? Helena laughed, a humorless sound. That clinic saved Clara from a mediocre fate. She was stubborn, rebellious, emotionally uncontrolled. Now she is disciplined, focused. She's a terrified child. They both are. They are exceptional, Helena replied with absolute conviction. Ask anyone. Teachers, tutors, family friends. They all admire how extraordinary they are. The price is too high. Helena moved closer, invading his personal space. There is no price too high for the extraordinary, Richard. Something you seem to understand when it came to business, but curiously failed to grasp when it comes to family. This isn't raising extraordinary children. It's abuse. Abuse! Helena laughed again. Such a convenient concept for those too weak to demand excellence. My parents understood that when they raised me. Now I understand it with our daughters. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Helena wasn't a monster born from nothing. She was the product of a similar upbringing. The cycle of abuse disguised as excellence continued through generations. I'm taking them out of here, Richard declared firmly. I'm going to expose what you're doing. Helena's smile was almost pitying. With what proof? Your word against mine? The absent fathers against the devoted mothers? Be realistic, Richard. No one will believe you. I have more evidence than you can imagine. Something wavered in Helena's confident gaze, a split second of uncertainty. Even if you do, remember one thing. The girls are my daughters as much as they are yours, and I know ways to ensure you never see them again if you try to cross me. The threat hung in the air like a poisonous perfume. You wouldn't dare, Richard challenged. Don't test me. Helena adjusted her pearl necklace with perfectly manicured fingers. We have the gala next week, an important event for the foundation, for our public image. I suggest you keep up appearances until then. Afterwards, well, we can discuss more permanent arrangements for your involvement in the girls' lives. When she left, leaving a trail of expensive perfume in the air, Richard stood motionless, absorbing the veiled threat. Helena was more dangerous than he had imagined, not just cruel to her daughters, but willing to do anything to maintain her control over them. That night, as the house slept, Richard checked the camera recordings on his phone. Helena had spent 2 hours in her office, making calls, sending emails. In one of the phone conversations, partially captured by the audio, she mentioned contingency preparations, and the clinic is ready if necessary. The message was clear. If he confronted her openly, Helena was prepared to send the girls back to that terrible place. Richard sent the recordings to his lawyer with an urgent message. "We need to act faster. She's planning something." Mark's reply came minutes later. "Come to the office tomorrow at 8 a.m. I have news about the judge." Sitting in the darkness of his room, Richard looked at the photo of the twins he kept on his bedside table. It was a picture from before he left, when they were only two, genuine smiles, bright eyes, the spontaneity that Helena had systematically crushed. "I'll bring that joy back," he promised in a low voice. "Whatever it takes." What he didn't know was that Helena was also looking at a photo at that very moment. In her room, she contemplated an old photograph of her own childhood, a girl with somber eyes next to parents with severe expressions. And on her face there was no guilt or conflict, only resolute determination. Two visions of family, two concepts of love, about to collide with devastating force. Mark Langley's office was already lit when Richard arrived, just before 8 in the morning. The lawyer was not alone. Beside him, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression and grey hair cut in a practical style was introduced as Fiona Collins, a public prosecutor specializing in children's rights. Fiona is one of the few people who isn't intimidated by the Caldwell name, Mark explained as they poured coffee. "I've encountered the Caldwells in other cases," the prosecutor commented, her intelligent eyes assessing Richard. "I could never get concrete proof, but I always knew there was something wrong with that family." Richard felt a pang of hope, an unexpected ally. "I have proof now. Videos, financial documents, even records of Clara's admission when she was only 4. Fiona nodded gravely. "Mark showed me some of the material. It's disturbing, but we still need to be cautious. The Caldwells have considerable influence in the local judiciary, especially through Judge Aaron Langley," Mark added, passing a folder to Richard. "It's no coincidence we share a last name. He's my cousin, and I have something that might help our case." Richard opened the folder, finding bank statements, photographs of discrete meetings, and conversation transcripts. "Aaron has been receiving regular payments from Helena's foundation for years," Mark explained. "I always suspected he was involved in something illicit, but I never had proof. When you mentioned the connection to the family court, I started digging." "He would compromise his own career for money?" Richard asked, incredulous. Mark laughed humorlessly. "Aaron has always had expensive tastes on a judge's salary. But it's not just money. The Caldwells offered connections, social prestige, a place among the city's elite. For someone like him, who has always felt inferior for coming from a less prestigious branch of the family, that's irresistible." "What does this mean for our case?" Fiona intervened. "It means we need to request that another judge handle any proceedings involving your daughters, and we need to act quickly, before Helena realizes we know about this connection." "We have a plan," Mark continued, "but it's risky, and we need your full agreement." For the next 2 hours, the three discussed the details of the strategy, a combination of legal action and carefully orchestrated public exposure. Richard felt simultaneously hopeful and apprehensive. There was so much at stake, and Helena was a formidable opponent. "The charity gala will be the perfect setting," Mark concluded when they finished. "All the key players will be there, including the press. It's our best chance." "What if Helena tries something before then?" Richard asked, remembering the veiled threat. "That's why we need the emergency protection order," Fiona replied. "I'll file it today, based on the evidence we have. It will legally prevent her from removing the children from the residence or sending them to any institution without a court order. And if she ignores the order, then she'll be clearly breaking the law," the prosecutor answered, "which will only strengthen our case." When Richard returned to the mansion that afternoon, he found an atmosphere of frantic activity. Staff were decorating the grand ballroom. Florists were delivering elaborate arrangements. Technicians were setting up sound and lighting equipment. "Have the gala preparations already started?" he asked Rose, who was supervising the cleaning. "Mrs. Helena moved everything up by a day," the housekeeper replied, looking worried. "She said there was a change of plans." Richard's heart raced. "Where are the girls?" "So in their room, packing their bags." "Bags?" Rose lowered her voice. "Mrs. Helena said they're going to spend a few days at their grandparents' coastal home after the gala, to rest from the stress of rehearsals." Helena's plan became clear: remove the children before Richard could act. He rushed up the stairs. finding the twins in their room, meticulously folding clothes into small matching suitcases. "Looks like you're getting ready for a trip," he commented, trying to keep his voice casual. The girls exchanged quick glances before Clara replied, "We're going to our grandparents' coastal home after the gala." "Mommy said it's a reward for our good behavior," Olivia added, though her tone suggested no enthusiasm. Richard sat on the edge of one of the beds. "And do you want to go?" Again, that exchange of looks. "It doesn't matter what we want," Clara murmured finally. "Mommy has already decided." "And what if I told you that you don't have to go, that you can stay here with me?" The twins' eyes widened with a mixture of hope and fear. "Mommy would be very angry," Olivia whispered. "Sometimes," Richard replied softly, "we have to do what's right, even when it's hard, even when someone gets angry." He was about to say more when the sound of heels in the hallway announced Helena's arrival. The girls immediately went back to folding clothes, as if afraid of being caught talking. "Ah, you're back," Helena commented as she entered the room. "I thought you'd be busy with your business all day. I wanted to be present for the gala preparations. It seems everything has been moved up." Helena smiled, that smile that never reached her eyes. "An opportunity came up. Some important guests could only attend tomorrow, so we adapted the plans." "And the girls' trip to your parents' house, was that moved up too?" A brief flash of irritation crossed her perfectly made-up face. "I see Rose can't maintain discretion. Yes, the girls will go to the coast after the gala. The city environment has been stressful for them. Curious. I haven't noticed any signs of stress." Helena moved closer, lowering her voice so only Richard could hear. "Don't test my patience, Richard. I've made it clear I will do whatever is necessary to protect my daughters. Protect or control. To a mother, they are the same thing." Helena turned to the twins. "Finish packing and then come down for the final rehearsal. The pianist is waiting." When Helena left, Richard stayed with his daughters, silently helping them pack. He didn't want to alarm them with the impending conflict, but he needed to prepare them somehow. "Girls," he said finally, "tomorrow might be a different kind of day. Things might happen that you don't expect." "What kind of things?" Clara asked, suddenly alert. "Changes. Good changes, I hope. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. To protect you, for real." The twins looked at him with unreadable expressions, a mixture of hope and skepticism that broke his heart. They had been betrayed so many times by adults who were supposed to protect them that words of comfort sounded empty. "I promise," Richard added, with all the sincerity he could muster. "This time it will be different." Later that night, after the girls had been put to bed, Richard received a message from Fiona. "Protection order granted. It will be served tomorrow morning. Do not leave the children alone with her." A small relief. The plan was in motion. The next morning, the mansion was a whirlwind of activity. Staff rushed back and forth, finalizing preparations for the gala that would begin at 7 that evening. Helena supervised everything with military precision, occasionally casting suspicious glances at Richard, who strategically kept himself close to the twins. At 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. Richard, who had been waiting for the moment, answered it himself. It was a court officer, accompanied by 2 policemen. "Mr. Richard Miller?" the officer asked formally. "Yes, that's me." "I have a protection order to serve." He handed over the official document, prohibiting the removal of the minors Clara and Olivia Miller from the family residence or their admission into any institution without prior judicial authorization. Helena appeared in the hall, her face a mask of forced composure. "What is going on here?" Richard handed her the document. "A protection order for our daughters, Helena. From now on, you cannot send them anywhere without a court order, including your parents' coastal home." Helena read the document, the only indication of her fury being the slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hands. When she looked up, her gaze held silent promises of retaliation. "This is absurd," she declared, forcing a tone of maternal outrage. "Why would I need authorization to take my own daughters to their grandparents' house?" "The order is clear, ma'am," the officer intervened. "The minors must remain in the family residence pending a court decision." "Based on what?" Helena demanded. "What ridiculous accusations has my husband invented?" "The case is sealed," the officer replied. "But the order was granted based on substantial evidence of risk to the children." Helena turned to Richard as soon as the officers left. Her mask of composure had completely fallen away, revealing a glacial fury. "You have no idea what you've just done," she hissed. "No one opposes the Caldwell family and gets away with it." "This is over, Helena," Richard replied firmly. "The abuse, the manipulation, all of it. I won't let you keep hurting our daughters. Hurting them?" Helena laughed a humorless sound. "I turned them into exemplary children. Ask anyone. Compare them to the undisciplined, mediocre creatures other people call children. They are children, not trophies or experiments. They deserve a normal childhood." Normal? The disdain in Helena's voice was palpable. Mediocrity disguised as normality. "Is that what you wish for them?" "I wish for them to be happy, Helena. Something they clearly are not under your reign of terror." Helena adjusted her pearl necklace, regaining some of her composure. "This isn't over, Richard. The gala is still happening tonight. Our entire social circle will be present. I suggest we keep up appearances. For now." Her smile was as cold as ice. "After all, we don't want a scandal, do we?" The veiled threat was clear. Helena still believed she was in control, still trusted her impeccable public image and the Caldwells' powerful connections. Richard let her maintain that illusion, while mentally reviewing every step of the plan he had laid out with Mark and Fiona. The next few hours passed in a strange limbo of forced normality. Helena continued to supervise the gala preparations as if nothing had happened, maintaining a perfect social smile in the presence of the staff. The twins were subjected to a full beauty session, hair, nails, light makeup appropriate for their age, as Helena insisted. Richard managed only a few moments alone with his daughters while they waited for their dresses to arrive. "Remember what I said," he murmured, making sure no one could hear them. "Things are going to change today. It might seem scary at the moment, but it will be for the better." "What's going to happen?" Clara asked, her eyes alert. "The truth is going to come out," he replied simply. "You just need to be yourselves. Nothing more." When evening finally arrived, the mansion was resplendent with lights, flowers, and music. Guests in formal attire began arriving shortly after 7. The city's elite, politicians, business leaders, local celebrities, all drawn by the prestige of the New Horizons Foundation and the Caldwell name. Helena and Richard greeted the guests at the entrance to the grand ballroom, the perfect picture of a successful, harmonious couple. Only the occasional glances they exchanged, laden with opposing meanings, revealed the underlying tension. The twins, in identical light blue silk dresses, stayed close, rehearsed smiles on their small faces as they received automatic compliments from adults who barely looked at them. Victor and Agnes Caldwell arrived with their usual pomp, ignoring Richard while lavishing exaggerated attention on their granddaughters and commenting on how they were growing up to be just like their mother, an observation that made Richard shudder internally. Around 8, Helena took the small stage set up in the ballroom, radiant in her haute couture gown, the personification of the perfect hostess. A hush fell quickly as she took the microphone. "Dear friends, it is with immense joy that we welcome you to this special evening. The New Horizons Foundation is celebrating 5 years of dedicated work, transforming the lives of children and young people." Richard watched the crowd as Helena eloquently spoke about social commitment, a vision for the future, and the importance of molding young minds with discipline and excellence. The guests sipped expensive champagne and nodded in approval, completely taken in by the flawless public image Helena had built over the years. His gaze met Mark's, discreetly positioned near the ballroom entrance. The lawyer gave a small affirmative nod. Everything was ready. "And now, with pride, I present our young ambassadors, my daughters Clara and Olivia, who will demonstrate how talent, when nurtured with appropriate discipline, can flourish even at the tenderest of ages." Polite applause filled the ballroom as the twins made their way to the piano. The ensuing silence was thick with expectation, as Olivia positioned her fingers on the keys and Clara prepared to turn the pages of the score. The music began, a complex piece by Rachmaninoff, absurdly difficult for a child. Richard watched Olivia's face, the tension in her small shoulders, the fear disguised as concentration in her eyes. That's when he noticed it, a slight tremor in his daughter's hands, a subtle mistake, almost imperceptible to most listeners, but not to Helena, whose smile froze instantly. Olivia recovered quickly, continuing the piece, but Richard could see the panic growing in her eyes, the awareness of the mistake affecting her concentration. Another mistake, this one more noticeable. Clara glanced quickly at her sister, at Helena, at Richard, a silent plea for help. It was at that moment that Richard moved, walking towards the piano. He sat beside Olivia on the bench, smiled gently, and began to play with her, improvising, adapting, turning the mistakes into intentional variations. His daughter's eyes widened in surprise, but soon she was following his lead, visibly relaxing as the music transformed into something new, less rigid, more joyful. Richard noticed Helena crossing the ballroom towards him, but it was too late. The moment of genuine intimacy between father and daughter had captured everyone's attention. When the music ended, the applause was spontaneous and warm. Not the polite approval for a display of technique, but a genuine reaction to an authentic emotional connection. "Thank you," Richard said into the microphone, his arms around his daughter's. "But tonight isn't just about music. It's about truth." A murmur went through the crowd. Helena had stopped halfway to the stage, suddenly alert to the danger. "The New Horizons Foundation has done admirable work on the surface," Richard continued, feeling the twins tense beside him. "But tonight, I'd like to show you what happens away from the spotlight. The real special program that your generous donations are funding." That was the signal. The lights dimmed and a large screen descended behind them. Mark triggered the remote, and images began to appear, edited clips from the footage Richard had captured. Helena cruelly reprimanding the girls for minor mistakes. Helena applying discipline in the closet. Excerpts of financial documents showing diversions to the secret clinic. A collective shock went through the ballroom. Helena, finally understanding what was happening, rushed towards the stage. "Turn that off immediately. This is an invasion of privacy, a fabrication." But as more images appeared, the coastal clinic, photographs of children with empty eyes, Clara's admission papers from when she was 4 with clearly fabricated diagnoses. "Behind the facade of philanthropy," Richard continued, his voice firm despite his emotion, "is a systematic operation of child abuse disguised as therapy. Children whose only crime was not meeting the absurd expectations of parents obsessed with control and appearances. My own daughters have been victims of this cruel system, and I will no longer allow it to continue." Chaos erupted in the ballroom. Horrified guests murmured amongst themselves, some already discreetly heading for the exits to avoid association with the imminent scandal. The photographers and journalists present, strategically invited by Mark, eagerly documented everything. Helena finally reached the stage, her face a mask of controlled fury. "How dare you? In front of everyone, destroying everything I've built? You built it on lies, Helena. On the suffering of our daughters." It was then that something unexpected happened. Clara, always the more reticent of the twins, suddenly broke free from her father's embrace and ran to Helena. "Mommy, don't let them take you away." The entire ballroom fell silent. Helena, momentarily taken aback, automatically hugged her daughter, looking at Richard with a flash of triumph in her eyes. It was the perfect image, the devoted mother unjustly accused, with her daughter running into her arms. But then Olivia spoke, her small voice clear in the silent ballroom. "Clara's afraid they'll take you to the special place, Mommy, like they did to her." The cruel simplicity of the observation struck everyone. It wasn't love that motivated Clara's gesture. It was fear. The same conditioned fear Helena had instilled in her daughters for years. Helena's eyes met Richard's over Clara's head, and for the first time, he saw something he never expected. Uncertainty. The perfect facade was finally beginning to crack. Fiona Collins chose this moment to step forward, striding through the ballroom accompanied by 2 police officers. "Mrs. Helena Miller," she announced formally, "as a representative of the public prosecutor's office, I am here to notify you of the opening of a formal investigation into the activities of the New Horizons Foundation and its connections to the renewal clinic on the coast. I must also inform you that Child Protective Services is issuing a protective measure for Clara and Olivia Miller, who will be placed under the temporary custody of their father while the investigation proceeds." Agnes Caldwell strode forward, aristocratic indignation in every line of her body. This is an outrage. Her vulgar spectacle. Helena is an exemplary mother, a respected community leader, and she is also a suspect in child abuse, financial fraud, and bribery of public officials, Fiona replied coldly. The evidence is substantial, Mrs. Caldwell. I suggest the family consider cooperating with the investigations. The look Agnes shot Richard promised war. Victor, beside her, looked simultaneously furious and worried, the businessman quickly calculating the scandal's impact on his empire. At the center of it all, Helena stood motionless, still holding Clara. Her gaze met Richard's once more, and he realized that, despite everything, a part of her truly believed she was doing what was best for her daughters, a distorted vision of love and protection, inherited from her own dysfunctional upbringing. "It's over, Helena," he said softly. "Let Clara come with me. We can handle this in a way that doesn't traumatize the girls any further." For a moment, it seemed Helena would resist. But then, surprisingly, she knelt to be at Clara's level, holding her by the shoulders. "Go with your father now," she said, with a softness Richard had rarely witnessed. "Be strong. Always be strong." Clara nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. As she pulled away, Helena remained kneeling, the perfect image of composure visibly crumbling as the camera flashes captured the exact moment the facade finally shattered completely. The soft morning light filtered through the curtains of Richard's downtown apartment. A week had passed since the night of the gala, a week of emotional turmoil, adjustments, and small victories. The twins were asleep in the room he had hastily prepared, 2 beds side by side, walls he had let them choose the color for themselves, a light blue, not the pink he had naively expected, toys and books bought in a shopping marathon the day after the scandal. Richard watched the coffee brew as he mentally reviewed everything that had happened. Helena had been released after initial questioning, but was forbidden from approaching the girls without supervision. The mansion had been partially sealed off for the investigation into the foundation's financial records. The local press talked of nothing else. The model philanthropist revealed as an abuser, the secret coastal clinic, the connections to public officials. The Caldwell family was mobilizing expensive lawyers and political connections for damage control. But the scandal was too big to be easily suppressed. And in the middle of this hurricane, 2 7-year-old girls were trying to understand the radical change in their lives. The sound of light footsteps alerted Richard to the arrival of one of his daughters. Clara appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair disheveled, a sight that contrasted sharply with the impeccably groomed child Helena presented to the world. "Good morning, Princess," Richard smiled. "Did you sleep well?" Clara nodded shyly. "Olivia is still asleep. Are you hungry? I can make pancakes." A small smile appeared on the girl's face, still hesitant as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to show enthusiasm. "Can we put chocolate on them?" "Of course. We can put chocolate, fruit, whatever you want." As Richard prepared the batter, Clara sat at the kitchen table watching him with attentive eyes. In the last few days, she had been more open to his approach than Olivia, who remained cautious, almost waiting for everything to return to the previous normal. "Daddy," Clara called softly, "are we going to see Mommy today?" Richard felt his heart clench. The twins had asked about Helena daily, with a mixture of longing and apprehension that he found difficult to handle. "Not today, Princess. Remember what Dr. Viola explained. First, you'll have a few sessions with her. Then there will be a meeting with Mommy with the doctor present." Dr. Viola Shaw, ironically, the ex-wife of Dr. Alan Shaw from the Coastal Clinic, and now one of his main accusers, was the child psychologist appointed by the court to work with the twins. A kind and patient woman who had earned the girls' hesitant trust in their first 2 sessions. "Is Mommy mad at us?" Clara asked, her eyes downcast. Richard abandoned the pancake batter and sat beside his daughter, holding her delicate little hands. "No, Princess. None of this is your fault or Olivia's. Adults sometimes make wrong choices, even when they think they're doing what's best. But Mommy always said that if we weren't perfect, no one would truly love us." The words were like knives in Richard's heart, the painful revelation of the conditioning the girls had been subjected to for years. "That's not true. Clara, true love doesn't depend on perfection. I love you and Olivia exactly as you are, with your qualities, flaws, talents, struggles, everything." Clara studied him with eyes too serious for a 7-year-old. Even when we make mistakes on the piano. Especially when you make mistakes on the piano, he smiled. Did you know I was terrible at math when I was your age? My mother, your grandmother you never got to meet, never stopped loving me because of... The girl seemed to process this information with the seriousness of a little philosopher. Richard realized it would take time, a lot of time, to undo the emotional knots Helena had so efficiently tied. Olivia appeared at the doorway, her hair even more disheveled than her sister's, her eyes puffy with sleep. I smelled food. Pancakes with chocolate, Richard announced. Want to help? The offer to participate in food preparation still surprised the girls. In Helena's house, the kitchen was forbidden territory for them, except during the occasional formal etiquette lessons. The twins exchanged glances. That silent communication Richard was beginning to understand was not just a twin phenomenon, but a survival mechanism developed under Helena's regime. Can we really? Olivia asked cautiously. Of course. Let's wash our hands first. Breakfast turned into a small party. Lopsided pancakes covered in too much chocolate, spilled juice that no one was scolded for cleaning up. Hesitant laughter that became more natural as time went on. It was a glimpse of what could be, of what should have been from the start. After breakfast, while the girls got ready for their session with the psychologist, Richard received a call from Mark. We have a meeting with Judge Anna Morgan at 2 this afternoon, the lawyer informed him. It's about temporary custody and the terms of supervised visits. Will Helena be there? Yes, with her lawyer. It seems the Caldwells have hired Pierce Sterling, one of the most expensive in the capital. Any news on the clinic investigation? Mark sighed. Things are moving, but the Caldwells have influence. They've already managed to get a gag order preventing the press from publishing certain details. And some of the former patients are suddenly unavailable to testify. They're trying to cover it all up. Trying, yes, but we have Fiona on our side, and she's like a bulldog when it comes to child abuse cases. And public opinion is largely against Helena after the footage was leaked. Richard remembered Helena's expression that night, kneeling before Clara as her carefully constructed facade crumbled. There was something almost tragic in that moment. The woman who genuinely believed she was doing what was best for her daughters in her own twisted way. How do you think the hearing will go? Honestly, we have a strong case for full temporary custody. The evidence of abuse is substantial, and Dr. Viola's initial assessments confirm the psychological trauma. But, Mark hesitated. Helena is still their mother, and Judge Morgan, while fair, tends to favor arrangements that maintain some maternal bond when possible. Even in cases of proven abuse, the issue is that the kind of abuse Helena practiced, this cold discipline, this pressure for perfection, is harder to categorize than obvious physical abuse. Many in society still consider certain levels of rigidity in child rearing acceptable. Richard closed his eyes, massaging his temples. I understand, but don't worry. We have a solid case, and Clara's admission at age 4 is a particularly damning point. No judge in their right mind would hand the girls back to Helena without, at the very least, intensive supervision. After hanging up, Richard found the twins already dressed to leave, wearing comfortable clothes they had chosen themselves during their shopping trip, not the formal identical outfits Helena always imposed. Are we late? Clara asked, the concern for punctuality still deeply ingrained. No, princess. We have plenty of time. Richard smiled, helping Olivia with the hair she had tried to comb herself. And you know what? Even if we were late, it wouldn't be the end of the world. The girls exchanged skeptical glances. The notion that being late was acceptable still seemed revolutionary to them. The session with Dr. Viola went smoothly. Richard waited in the reception area, distractedly flipping through magazines, while trying not to think about the afternoon's hearing. When the twins came out of the office, they seemed lighter, though Olivia still maintained that guarded expression that broke his heart. How was it? He asked on the way to the car. Dr. Viola is nice, Clara replied. She doesn't get mad when we don't know the right answer. And there are no right answers, Olivia added shyly. She said we can feel what we feel, even if it's confusing. Richard smiled, storing these small victories in his memory. She's absolutely right. On the way to the courthouse, they stopped for lunch at a casual restaurant, something Helena would never allow. always insisting on elegant establishments where the girls had to display impeccable etiquette. "Can I really eat with my hands?" Olivia asked, looking with fascination at the burger before her. "Of course. That's how you eat a burger," Richard replied, demonstrating. The twins watched for a moment, then exchanged glances and, almost in sync, picked up their burgers with their hands. The expressions of surprise and pleasure that followed were worth more than any words. "Mummy never let us," Clara commented between bites. "She said it was vulgar." "Well, sometimes the most fun things are a little bit vulgar," Richard replied with a wink. "And there's nothing wrong with that." Lunch was interrupted by the arrival of Rose, the former housekeeper, whom Richard had invited to stay with the girls during the hearing. "Girls," the woman exclaimed, visibly moved to see them in such a relaxed setting. "How you've grown!" The twins ran to hug her, one of the few people who had shown them genuine affection during their years at the mansion. "Rose is going to stay with you at the apartment while I take care of some things," Richard explained. "You can watch a movie, play, whatever you like." "Any movie?" Olivia asked, her eyes wide with the possibility. "Within reason for your age," Richard smiled. "Rose will help you choose." After taking Rose and the twins to the apartment, Richard drove to the courthouse where Mark was waiting for him at the entrance. The lawyer looked tense but confident. "Helena's already here," he informed him in a low voice, "with her parents and Pierce Sterling. How does she look?" "That's perfectly composed, as if she were going to a charity event, not a custody hearing." Inside the courtroom, Helena sat upright in an elegant but sober suit, the picture of a concerned and wronged mother. Her eyes met Richard's briefly, betraying no emotion. Victor and Agnes Caldwell sat just behind her, exuding the air of aristocratic authority that had always characterized them. Agnes shot Richard an icy glare that promised war. Judge Anna Morgan, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a serene expression, entered the room, silencing those present. "This is a preliminary hearing regarding the temporary custody of Clara and Olivia Miller," she announced. "I want to make it clear from the outset that my sole concern is the well-being of the children, not the interests or conveniences of the adults involved." Richard felt a glimmer of hope, a good start. The hearing proceeded with formal presentations from the lawyers. Pierce Sterling was everything Mark had predicted, elegant, articulate, with an impressive ability to make the most damning actions sound like unfortunate misunderstandings. "My client acknowledges that she may have been overly strict in her disciplinary approach," he argued smoothly. "But her intentions were always the well-being and full development of her daughters. Any dedicated mother will understand the difficult line between necessary discipline and harmful permissiveness." Mark, when his turn came, was direct. "Your Honor, we are not talking about disciplinary rigor, but systematic psychological abuse documented on video and confirmed by psychological evaluation. We are talking about a 4-year-old child involuntarily committed to an unregulated psychiatric clinic for normal, age-appropriate behavior. We are talking about intimidation, emotional manipulation, and deliberate cruelty disguised as an education of excellence." The judge listened to both sides attentively, occasionally taking notes. When Dr. Viola was called to present her preliminary report, the tension in the room was palpable. The twins show clear signs of psychological trauma consistent with prolonged emotional abuse, the psychologist explained. Extreme performance-related anxiety, constant fear of punishment, difficulty expressing natural emotions, hypervigilant behavior. Particularly concerning is what I call the mirror effect. Clara, who was admitted to the clinic at age 4, exhibits more severe symptoms of submission and self-deprecation, while Olivia learned by observing her sister that resistance leads to painful consequences. "And what about the father?" the judge asked. "He was absent for years. The girls initially showed caution with Mr. Miller, but in recent sessions they have demonstrated growing trust. He has been consistent, affectionate yet firm, and, crucially, allows the children to express natural emotions without punishment or judgment." When Helena was called to testify, Richard observed the subtle transformation in her posture, from the elegant, restrained woman to the emotionally wounded mother. "My daughters are everything to me," she declared, her voice slightly choked. "Everything I did was with their future in mind, to give them the tools to excel in an increasingly competitive world. And that includes psychiatric commitment for a 4-year-old child." the judge asked directly. Helena hesitated for only a second. The clinic is a center of excellence in child development. Clara was exhibiting concerning behaviors, aggression, extreme rebellion. The experts recommended a period of intensive therapy. The same experts who received regular payments from the foundation you managed? A faint blush colored Helena's cheeks. I don't see how that is relevant to the quality of the treatment. The judge leafed through some documents. According to Dr. Viola's report, the concerning behaviors you mention are consistent with the normal development of a 4-year-old, occasional tantrums, resistance to certain tasks, expression of personal preferences. With all due respect, Your Honor, Helena intervened. Normal children do not bite other children or intentionally destroy valuable objects. And normal 4-year-olds do not play Chopin perfectly or speak 3 languages. So the judge retorted, what it seems to me is that you set deliberately unattainable standards and then punished the inevitable failure. Helena paled slightly, but maintained her composure. I only wanted the best for them. Richard was always absent, building his fortune. Someone had to ensure they had the best education, the best opportunities. When it was Richard's turn to testify, he felt the weight of his own mistakes and omissions. He frankly admitted his absence, his excessive focus on his career, his failure to notice the signs of abuse. I'm not here pretending to be the perfect father, he concluded, looking directly at the judge. I made grave mistakes by allowing my ambition to distance me from my daughters. But now I understand what truly matters, and I am fully committed to their well-being, not as trophies to be displayed, not as extensions of my ego, but as the incredible people they are, with the right to a genuine childhood. Judge Morgan watched him for a long moment before turning to the lawyers. I will review the reports and evidence presented, and will give my decision in 1 hour. This session is adjourned. During the break, Richard remained in the courthouse antechamber, unable to focus on the documents Mark was reviewing. His mind was with the twins, imagining them watching some animated movie with Rose, perhaps experiencing for the first time the simple joy of being a child without constant pressure. When the hearing resumed, Judge Morgan seemed to have reached a clear decision. This case, she began, represents one of the most difficult dilemmas we face in family court, the balance between parents' rights and the well-being of children, between stated intentions and actual impacts. Helena sat even straighter, her hands perfectly folded in her lap. Richard realized she truly believed she was right, that her distorted view of child-rearing was true love. Based on the evidence presented, the psychological evaluations and the testimonies heard, the judge continued, I grant full temporary custody of the minors Clara and Olivia Miller to their father, Richard Miller, for an initial period of 6 months. A murmur went through the room. Helena remained motionless, only a slight tremor in her hands betraying her emotion. During this period, the judge went on, the mother, Helena Miller, will have the right to supervised visits, initially in the presence of Dr. Viola Shaw once a week. Additionally, I order that Mrs. Miller undergoes psychological therapy with a court-appointed professional, with monthly progress reports. Agnes Caldwell stood up abruptly, but Victor pulled her back down, murmuring something in her ear. As for the investigation into the New Horizons Foundation and the Renewal Clinic, this court fully supports the work of the Public Prosecutor's Office and orders the freezing of all related assets until the investigations are concluded. The judge looked directly at Helena. Mrs. Miller, I want to make it clear that this decision is not irreversible. In 6 months, we will re-evaluate the case based on your therapeutic progress and the children's needs. Motherhood is not an absolute right, but a responsibility that must be exercised for the good of the children, not for the satisfaction of one's own emotional needs. When the session was adjourned, Richard watched as Helena was quickly surrounded by her parents and lawyer. For a brief moment, her eyes met his across the room, and for the first time, Richard saw something he never expected to see in Helena's always controlled gaze: vulnerability. On the way back to the apartment, Mark seemed pleased with the outcome. It was the best possible scenario. Full temporary custody for you, supervised visits to minimize manipulation, and the door isn't completely closed for Helena, which prevents her from becoming a martyr in the girl's eyes. Do you think she can change? Richard asked, genuinely curious. Understand what she did wrong? Mark sighed. Honestly, it's difficult. People like Helena have been conditioned for decades to see the world in a certain way. But if there's a strong enough reason for someone to change, her daughters, Richard completed, exactly. Love can be distorted, misdirected, but it's still love. Maybe with proper therapy, Helena can learn to express it in a healthy way. When Richard finally arrived at the apartment, he found a scene he never would have imagined possible weeks ago. The twins sitting on the living room floor, hair disheveled, faces smeared with chocolate, laughing openly as they watched an animated movie with Rose. "Daddy," Clara exclaimed upon seeing him. "We made fudge, and it's a delicious mess," Rose added with a smile. Richard felt something warm expand in his chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and hope. "Can I have a taste?" The twins ran to the kitchen, eager to show off their culinary creation. As he followed them, Richard noticed something different about Olivia. A looser, less guarded smile. A small but significant step. "How did it go?" Rose asked in a low voice, as the girls excitedly debated the ideal amount of chocolate. "Full temporary custody," he replied. "Helena will have supervised visits." The housekeeper nodded, visibly relieved. "They've asked about her several times. It's complicated. Even with everything they've been through, they miss their mother." "It's natural," Richard replied. "And I don't want them to stop loving her. I just want them to know that true love doesn't come with impossible conditions." When they all finally sat down at the kitchen table, tasting the slightly burnt but genuinely enthusiastic fudge, Richard watched his daughters, their still hesitant laughter, their occasionally apprehensive glances, as if expecting the rigid normality of before to return at any moment. There was a long road ahead, emotional scars that would take years to fully heal. Adjustments, adaptations, difficult moments. The shadow of Helena still loomed over them, not just as the abusive mother, but also as the mother who, in her twisted way, truly believed she was protecting her daughters. "I like your house, Daddy," Clara said suddenly, licking chocolate from her fingers, an act Helena would never have tolerated. "Can we stay here forever?" "For as long as you want," Richard replied, holding back the tears that threatened to fall. "This is your home now." "And can we make fudge again tomorrow?" Olivia asked. A rare moment of initiative. "Of course, Princess. And the day after and the day after that." The twins smiled, a real smile, not the rehearsed smile Helena demanded, and in that simple moment, sitting in a messy kitchen with his chocolate-smeared daughters, Richard knew he had made the right choice, however late. The road would be long, but they were finally heading in the right direction. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Richard, Helena, Clara, and Olivia has touched your hearts. This journey of discovery, pain, and redemption shows us how even the most fragmented families can find a path to healing when true love prevails over appearances. If this narrative about family ties, forgiveness, and new beginnings resonated with you, we have many other equally engaging stories on our channel. To access our special playlist of family dramas, click the link on the left. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on this video so we can continue bringing you stories that explore the complexity of human relationships. Every day, a new narrative that can inspire, move, and make you reflect. Share your favorite part of this story in the comments, or tell us about a situation where you witnessed the transformation of a family. We look forward to reading your experiences.